You'll find if you look across a lot of the companies that are killing it these days, they're led by a product person who has domain expertise of the thing that they do.
Welcome to the Founders Forum. I'm Blake Tengberg, a transactions attorney at Foley and Lardner. Well, I'm pleased to welcome Rhett Roberts, co-founder and CEO of LoanPro, to the show today. Rhett, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Blake. Excited to be here and have the conversation today.
Yeah, so for those who aren't already familiar, tell us about LoanPro.
Sure, we're a software platform, and our customers are banks, credit unions, really anyone who gives a loan, and they use our system for all of their compliance, calculations. Think of it as a system of record or operating system for these lenders to keep track of their loans and make sure they're servicing and managing those loans the right way.
So I understand the sort of genesis of LoanPro was you were in the lending business, an automotive dealership with your own loan software. So tell us about kind of what that experience was like and how that eventually sort of transitioned into the company that you guys have now.
Sure, you bet. It's a similar story to many that have happened where like an innovation of necessity has occurred. And so I often give kind of a throwback to Slack's story, right? They were an organization that raised a bunch of money. They were building a video game. Part of that, they had a distributed development team. They built their own communication channel amongst their own team. And they got to a spot where the video game wasn't working, take the money back to the PE firm. And they said, hey, I don't want the money back. What else do you have? What you build? And they're like, oh, there's this little tool we built. Well, we have kind of an interesting story itself. We owned some car dealerships that led us into auto lending. And we scaled and built out our own portfolio of loans. And in so doing, we were using some third-party software to manage our own portfolio. See, our problem wasn't originating, like sourcing, deciding on loans. Our problem was when you gave the loan out, you needed to keep track of that in a compliant way. You needed to get all your money back. We needed portfolio performance. And the software that we were using that was available in the marketplace, let's just say it left a lot to be desired. And so we went on the process of building. We weren't from the software world, right? I have a finance background, and we built an internal tool for our own lending company. And fast forward through almost 2 decades now, the entire journey. Fast forward to present day, what was that internal tool at our own lending company turned to what the business is today of LoanPro.
I mean, that's incredible. And so I understand you started the business with your 2 other brothers. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So family business, did all of those series of businesses together. And so we still own the business together, and we've actually expanded the scope of what it does now. And we have a few other things we'll probably talk about in a bit, but it has been a family business. And that's been important, is building out the cultural values and things of what that means to do. And how do you build most family businesses are more like jobs, right? They build something that's not necessarily could run as a business without them. And we have been methodical in the process of how do you build it into a way that is a scalable and sustainable business. And both Lloyd and Ben, my 2 brothers that we've done this with, it's been a great journey. And we've done a series of sequenced businesses together, and it's been a lot of fun.
Oh, that's really interesting. Well, I love the fact that it was something that you guys built because it was a gap in the market. Obviously, I'm sure that helps in the sales pitch to other companies. We're like, we were you with this issue. So that's really interesting. So I mean,
it builds like a domain expertise, right? If you think that anything that whatever your career is, if you think of engaging with somebody who actually gets it and understands it, and they can talk in the weeds and the details, that's always more helpful than someone who needs to like go out and do like a survey to understand a group that they don't fully have empathy for. So having this approachable and tactical empathy from being have been in the seat, that's very, very useful. And you'll find if you look across a lot of the companies that are killing it these days, they're led by a product person who has domain expertise of the thing that they do.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned something interesting. So you said that this was kind of in the process for about 2 decades. You guys have been building this company. I mean, as I understand it, LoanPro is, and growing and has been growing incredibly fast. But you actually bootstrapped the company for many years, which is somewhat unique for a tech company. Finally took on a Series A investment just a few years ago. What was that like? I mean, would you recommend that approach to aspiring entrepreneurs? Any regrets? Any wishes that you had done it sooner? Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the strategy, the hard thing about raising money is, right, you get diluted so much when if you raise the money when you really need it, you get diluted significantly. And as soon as you don't need the money is when everybody wants to give it to you. Right. And so that's a very interesting paradox. Obviously, it makes a lot of sense for the risk tolerances and things. But our approach was to kind of take the operations from one company and roll it into the next and rinse and repeat. So we did a series of businesses over the years. When I was young, like still in high school years, I worked with my brother and we invented a bridge that you suction cup to a windshield and made a injectable into the windshield for a resin to fix rock chips, and then built software to submit claims to the insurance companies, and then built a door-to-door sales team, and we had it at car washes and this windshield repair kit and process at car washes and oil change places and so forth. And so you learn through a sequence. You take one business idea and what works and what doesn't work, and then you iterate. And we went through a number of different businesses or use cases, if you will, and we were able to use the proceeds from one to pay it forward to the next and implement all of the learnings in that process. And so it takes a certain level of risk tolerance to proceed to do that, because you're not getting a fast personal consumption when you're successful. Instead, it's maybe insulating some of your prior mistakes, or it's paying it forward to give the next opportunity. And so that worked really well for us, but it was key that we did it in a family business, right?
Yeah.
The concept of when at least my experience has been that winning and losing, if you do it alone, it's pretty lonely. But if you do it with a partnership team, right, when you win, you're like, sweet, this is awesome. When you lose, you're like, well, it's only part mine. I got two other people to share it with. So it works out real well to have that organization together. But I would recommend having a tactical approach on what is the sequence of how you raise funds. So in our case, we didn't raise for a very long time. And by the time we did, it was really just a strategic move for us to do. And it was a transaction that we took, strategically choosing the right partner as we evolve and grow. We've grown significantly in the business since then. But at the time we raised, it's almost 3 years ago now. And it was at the time the largest Series A in the state of Utah's history. And it's because it's sort of probably misclassified. It was classified as Series A the first time we raised, but we were a much larger company by the time we actually took our first institutional capital. And so there has to be a strategy for each person. If there's an entrepreneur thinking about, if you feel like there's a roadblock that you need to raise money in order to do something, I'd encourage you to find another way, because if you're really successful in doing that, you can get a much better multiple, as well as you need to find that if you're on the opposite side of that, if you're the investor, you want to invest in somebody who has that grit to figure it out. And if you have the excuse of, well, it couldn't raise money, so, well, that's also kind of not the guy you want to invest in, or the gal that you want to invest in that process. So building that grit and the opportunity that it opens up to you by sequencing a series of strategies and then eventually raising as a liquidity event instead of raising as a funding mechanism for your idea. That's the way that we've approached it, and it's worked out well for us.
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's a lot of validation that comes from undergoing a capital raise. Did you feel any sort of anxiety or a lot of public validation when, a company does an external raise? Did you guys feel any sort of anxiety or, lack of validation from kind of the general community because you hadn't done a raise yet? Or were you guys feeling just like, no, we're confident, we know who we are, and there will be an eventual validation kind of publicly? Did you feel any of that? Because there's so much, pressure on tech companies to undergo a raise early to kind of show everyone like, yeah, we're doing extremely well. What was that like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's an interesting measuring rod that our society has created, right? We celebrate really the wrong thing. You celebrate doing the raise, which essentially just means if you're the entrepreneur, you now just have a massive amount of responsibility. When you probably ought to celebrate, instead of the inflection point of the raise, you ought to celebrate the inflection point of what's your value and the value that you're providing to your customers. And so there is a little bit of a paradox there, right? Where folks use someone who has done a raise, they use the event of a raise as a proxy. And it's a proxy for a number of things, but generally it's a due diligence proxy that you're doing something cool. Someone else did a bunch of homework on you to see if what you're doing is legit and if you're going to make an impact. And so to that extent, yes, there's a strategic reason to make a raise because many folks use that transaction as a proxy for something else. Case in point, when we sell to a lot of banks and credit unions, non-traditional FIs that use our software, and one of the request for proposal or RFP processes you go through is they're evaluating their options of what softwares they might use, and we're trying to win their business and have them hire us. They will use a variety of due diligence process. They'll go kick the tires. What's the technical capabilities? Give me technical designs. Who's the management team? And so forth. And one of those questions include a due diligence component of, are you financially stable? And sometimes the financially stable proxy is, who are your investors, or how much have you raised? You just as well could use a proxy of like, show me that you're profitable, show me a P&L, show me a balance sheet. And so to that extent, there is some pressure, but we were able to kind of have that stand off for a while by identifying what are all of the things that are raised as a proxy for, and create a strategy for each one of those. That way we were able to do it at the time, at our timing, when we wanted to do it with the partners that we wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah. And show we are profitable. We have every right to be here at the table.
That's right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, turning subjects a little bit, I've heard that one of your core values, or one of LoanPro's core values, is the Goldilocks rule. Tell me what that is, and how has it helped you guys to where you are now?
Sure. Well, it was told to me years ago, and I believe it, that if you can't explain something simply, then you don't understand it well enough. And that's a famous quote. And this Goldilocks rule, right? Think of when you're a kid, not too hot, not too cold. We think sustainable growth is a key strategy. Our customers are generally risk adverse. They're banks, right? And so they're put into this situation when they're trying to modernize their tech stack. They choose between the technology they have that was architected or built many years ago that has created some challenges and difficulties for them. They're trying to modernize that. But many of the tech stack providers of the new modern systems don't have a lot of stability or structure with them. So maybe their company is not profitable, so they're burning cash. If a bank signs with them, there's some risk introduced there, where the risk might be, what if they don't exist in a couple of years? And so we've approached this Goldilocks of not too hot and not too cold. And that's how we manage this sustainable growth, this cogwheel approach, and how we go ahead and manage any of the risk assessments we're doing. If it's our growth rate, if it's the technologies that we're using, the adoption rate on those, anything that could have risk associated with it, we do this sustainable growth model, and we use that Goldilocks because it's just pretty easy to remember from our childhood of not too hot and not too cold.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's amazing. Well, I want to be mindful of your time. What advice would you give to other founders that also want to have this kind of long-term growth and success that LoanPro has experienced?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I think there's a few things. I remember back in business school, this one stuck with me well, McKinsey's first law of first understand your problem. And I believe that one of the biggest issues is a lot of folks, and I've been guilty of it as well, they start solutioning a solution instead of taking what someone's proposing, peeling back the layers of the onion and figuring out what's the actual problem, and then going about and creating a solution for the problem. The second is take strategic risk, and in particular on innovation. Risk is not bad. You need to have it be very strategic risk. Uncontrolled, non-strategic risk is bad. But strategic risk is actually where all your upside is. And I've already mentioned the other two briefly, but this concept of creating a trust circle, where these are just off the top of my head, but the trust circle I have with my two brothers and our partnership and now my executive team, you need a team that you can win with and a team that you can lose with, and that you don't have to do sideways work, but you can just move forward together. And the final one is just make sure you're able to develop your storytelling skills, the ability of communicating value. And what problem does it solve for them? What unlock does it provide for them? And this communication style of really storytelling and providing examples is really one of the best things we look for when we hire folks and bring people on in the ecosystem, is their ability to do the proper level of storytelling, and that is just communicating value.
Well, thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for all that you've done on, behalf of the state of Utah, for all that you're doing with LoanPro. We sincerely appreciate you joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rhett.
Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep innovating.